The first exercise I want to do before I even worry about the pivot is going to be overbending and counterbending my horse on a circle. This is going to stretch out their shoulders, so making sure we have good lift and extension through the shoulders so that they can actually step across in their pivot really nicely. So here I'm counterbending, keeping her on a circle, and then I'm going to see if she will overbend to the inside and try to maintain the same circle, and also make sure that she's not tossing her head between the transition from the overbend and the counterbend. So you can see her really stepping through those shoulders there. This also shows that I have a lot of good control with my leg and seat cues. So here's the same exercise, the opposite direction. So you can see overbend, maintaining a circle, and she's maintaining a lot of great softness in there. So that's another thing I'm looking for, is that it's smooth, it's soft. That transition from overbend to counterbend is really clean, smooth. They're not getting a head toss or bracing against the bit. I do recommend starting this in a snaffle when you do this exercise, just because the pressure is extraordinarily clear. Now I'm just going to pick it up into a trot and do the same thing. So overbend in the trot. There's a little bobble there, but that's okay. Counterbend in the trot. And back to the overbend. Next, I'm going to spiral her in from a trot using seat and leg cues. So sitting down on my seat bones, outside leg. And if I lose that forward impulsion in the hind, I'm going to push her back out onto that circle. We really want them to understand that the pivot is actually a forward motion so that they step across really nicely. So there she lost impulsion, push her back out. So this is going to build the mechanics of that spin. There, she kind of lost it. I push her a little harder. She found it there, so I'm going to give her a rest. So here I just counterbended, overbended, stretched her out in the trot this direction, and now I'm going to try to spiral her in. So I'm just adding a little extra outside leg and sitting down on my seat bones, asking her to come around and through. That wasn't too bad. Push her back out so that she knows that it's a forward motion. So this is building the mechanics of the pivot. It has to maintain forward to make sure that we keep that hind end engaged. And if she wanted to fall out of it, I kind of pushed her forward. And we'll do it again. So we spiral out. Spiral back in. I think I'm kind of overbending her here, but that's a bad habit of mine. There, that was pretty nice. So here when she gets it, she gets to rest and get a little reward for doing it right. This is the next exercise. I call it a snowflake exercise, and this is going to start to build on the desire to pivot. So what I'm doing is I'm first telling her to go out. I'm picking a spot in the center here that I'm going to use as my pivot point, right about there. Walk her or trot her out. About 5 steps or so, maybe a little more. Back her up to that spot, pivot, and go out. So go out, drive her forward. This is keeping that impulsion in the pivot. So that forward motion, but eventually this is going to build the desire for the pivot. So I'm going to do fewer and fewer steps forward until eventually I just ask for the pivot. And when she walks out of it, she will have to back up, back into that spot and pivot. So she's going to find the release in the pivot, and this will get her to hold that pivot without me doing anything. I'll be able to sit in a neutral position. So here we're starting to do fewer steps. Bringing her back to that spot, pivot, forward, fewer steps, back up, pivot, forward. Now there, I kind of asked for a little extra pivot, and just when she walks out of it, I just bring her back into it. So back her up. Here I did a little click, click to see where she would go, and she's holding it while I'm sitting in neutral position. And she stops when I ask, just based off of a whoa cue. Same exercise the other direction. Now here, I don't really like my hand position. I think I'm getting away with it because I have a leverage bit on. I'd rather that my hands are a bit lower and wider, especially if I'm working in a snaffle. So it's good for me to review and see. And here she picked up on it really fast. She remembered it from the other side. And without a whole lot of reminder, there I had to pick her up, bring her back into it. She was going to walk out, so I got after her, try again, and there she goes. So it's not the most correct pivot, but she's really building the desire to hold it. She's crossing over nicely. So I can keep working on the mechanics of it by doing that spiraling exercise and really keeping it as forward motion, and then being careful that I'm not overbending. I really want to be turning her to 1 o'clock or 11 o'clock position. So there I decided to go ahead and bring her out and spiral her and see if I could get her to hold the spin, hold the pivot in a neutral position after spiraling her in, which she did okay. Little correction there, wasn't too bad. So we're going to bring her back out, get that forward motion, spiral her in, and then go to neutral when she gets it. And if she gets lazy, I just click. So there she got a little lazy, I just remind her. And then back to neutral, reminder, back to neutral, and there she goes. No cue needed right there. She's just kind of neutral, little reminders here and there, but not too bad. Stops on a whoa. Now from here, I'm going to actually ask her from a standstill. See a small rein cue, a little leg cue. And now this isn't the best mechanically, but it does show how we're getting that desire to stay in the spin.